Spectrovision Radio.
While our government's official position is not to speculate on this subject, we can choose to let our minds explore other possibilities, to use our imaginations. For if we consider that astroscientists agree on one point, that the possibility of life elsewhere is not only quite probable, some feel it is there without a doubt. Let us suppose then that these objects are real space vehicles, extraterrestrial in origin, and not an illusion of the mind.
I'm Ryan Sprague, and you are now somewhere in the skies. Hey guys, Ryan here with a special episode for you today. The Age of Disclosure documentary has officially released on Amazon Prime, and it is making waves in the mainstream. But does it live up to the hype in the UFO community? I decided to reach out to you, the listeners, to get your thoughts, your opinions, and your reviews of the Age of Disclosure documentary. I'll also be giving you my personal exclusive review at the end of this episode. So I want to give a special thanks and shout out to everyone who submitted their written and audio reviews and opinions and recaps of the Age of Disclosure. So without further ado, let's just hop right in. First up, we have a written review from Keith over in Malta. Keith says, for those already familiar with the subject, little here feels new. But for the general public, it may be eye-opening to hear highly reputable individuals speak so directly about non-human intelligence. That alone could help push disclosure and public acceptance forward. It's disappointing that the film avoids the cognitive interface aspect of encounters, reported by many pilots and military personnel, which highlights the transformative and often positive side of these experiences. Overall, the documentary complements recent UAP films, though the lack of women featured remains discouraging. Still, the production is polished and serious. For skeptics, the willingness of 34 officials to speak on the record shows the seriousness of the issue. For longtime researchers, the material offers little that's new, but it's a strong, cohesive presentation. Dan Farah and the participants deserve credit for another meaningful step toward a more informed public conversation. Let's move to some audio. First up, we have Grant Lavac from Australia, host of the Unexplained Rundown on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and let's hear from Grant in his review of the Age of Disclosure.
Hi guys, Grant Lavac here from the Unexplained Rundown. Thought I'd share my thoughts on the recently released The Age of Disclosure. Overall, I think it was an incredibly comprehensive and well-produced documentary, particularly for first-time director Dan Farah. We need to remember that this documentary was not for us. It was largely for a still very much uninformed general public. So for us that follow the UAP UFO topic and are well-versed, it didn't really offer us anything new. There were a few breadcrumbs in there that I found very interesting that I wasn't aware of, but this was really intended for the general public that's still not really engaged on this topic. That said, there were some things that I found incredibly interesting, and there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered for me that I would love to have an opportunity to ask Dan Farah and those that were in the documentary, but alas, I never will. So I thought I would share some thoughts with you now. So first and foremost, it was interesting that ORSAP was never once mentioned. I think it wasn't mentioned by name, but it was alluded to very briefly by Jay Stratton during his introduction. But there was really never acknowledgement of ORSAP, which we know is nicknamed ATIP, and that it was the $22 million that was actually provided to ORSAP, not the ATIP program that Jay Stratton and Lou Elizondo have referred to, and what was really the story that was put out in the 2017 New York Times article. So the lack of any acknowledgement of ORSAP was an interesting omission for me. I also wondered why James Lakatsky wasn't featured in the documentary. If it was 34 current and former government officials and people in the intelligence community, why was someone like James Lakatsky not involved? Particularly when Jay Stratton, Hal Puthoff, and Eric Davis were all part of ORSAP. So why was there a decision not to include James Lakatsky? I also found it interesting that you had David Grush was nowhere to be seen in the documentary. He's been one of the most integral figures in the UAP, UFO disclosure movement in the last few years, but there was no inclusion of him for an interview. Certainly he was showcased via all of the interviews that he's done in his congressional testimony, but he was nowhere to be seen in the documentary. Why? It was also interesting that there was no reference to the Pentagon's investigatory efforts via ARO. It was all about the UAP task force. There was no mention of the current effort to better understand the extent and nature of UAP. Some of the footage that was used in the documentary, we know that has been debunked according to ARO. So it was interesting choice of footage that they included alongside some of the accompanying commentary. But the claims were certainly interesting. The claim that Eric Davis had made that he had had a conversation or multiple conversations with former President George Bush 1 in 2003 about the Holloman case, and that Bush was not able to get access to information that he was after because apparently he didn't have a need to know. And this is not just the former president, but former CIA director. So I think there's a lot more to learn about Eric Davis's claim that he had conversations with George Bush, and I hope that more information comes to light on that in due course. But overall, incredibly comprehensive, well-produced documentary. My hat goes off to Dan Farah, so kudos to Dan Farah. You know, a lot of people have been complaining that why does it cost so much money to watch this documentary? Well, you got to remember, folks, that it didn't really get a massive cinematic release as I think they had hoped for and intended. So the fact that it was self-released by Dan Farah, obviously the producers want to make a return on their investment. So there is a first release fee that people are asked to pay. And if you can't afford it, well, then wait until it comes out and it's released free of charge, which I'm sure it will be in due course if you have an Amazon Prime subscription, and I'm sure it will be made available on other platforms in due course. So people have said, well, the fact that it has such a heavy price tag to it, not many people will see it. Well, maybe in the immediate short term, but over time, I think more and more people will see it, particularly if The Age of Disclosure does get an Oscar nomination, because it is eligible for an Oscar nomination for documentary feature. And you can bet your bottom dollar that if it receives an Oscar nomination, a hell of a lot more people around the globe will be exposed to it. And I think will become a lot more interested in this topic. So there are my thoughts, folks. I hope that's been of value. Again, I really enjoyed it. Nothing all that new, some interesting breadcrumbs for me. Incredibly well done job by Dan Farah, and I look forward to hearing some of the thoughts from some of the other folks that'll be sharing their comments as well. So many thanks.
All right, special thanks to Grant Levac for that. Next up, we have KitKat to Cat on Facebook. They say, hello, Canadian here, immersed in this topic for more than 40 years, so fairly well-versed. Age of Disclosure is well packaged, but very US-centric. While there may be valid reasons for that focus, future documentaries could benefit from assembling an international group of people in equivalent positions to those featured. to show this is truly a global reality. Next up, we have another longtime supporter of Somewhere in the Skies, and that is Garrett, or Gaz. Through email, Gaz says, I've heard many hosts of podcasts share the feeling that because of its protracted release, Age of Disclosure missed the boat. I can understand that sentiment as much as the content isn't new to the UFO community. Sorry to say, folks, but this film isn't aimed at the UFO community. It's certainly divisive within the UFO community, as it is clearly drawing on a line between experiencers and non-experiencers. As a documentary, its flow and pace is second to none, setting itself within a chronological framework. Dan Farah effortlessly weaves revelations on specific subjects of the phenomenon within a context of known information. If you expect Age of Disclosure to be disclosure, then you're going to be sorely disappointed. The title says that we're now in it, whether you like it or not. There are claims that this is a government psyop, because government is controlling disclosure. The conspiracy is no longer that, so now they have to create a new conspiracy, i.e. the psyop, to get around the fact that disclosure isn't going the way they thought it would. Age of Disclosure is not just about UFOs or aliens. It's disclosing the mechanisms behind the secrecy. My partner, who sat down to watch this with me, watched in silence halfway through and joked, "This is like listening to you." I definitely know that feeling. At the end, here's my simple review. This is actually fucking scary. Next up, we have some audio from the bombshell maestro himself, Patrick, from Vetted. Be sure to subscribe to Vetted on YouTube, and I've been featured in a couple of his videos, so I hope you will check those out. There's one about Rendlesham Forest and so many more, so be sure to subscribe to Vetted. You will not be disappointed. Check this out. Here's Patrick.
What's up, Ryan? What's up, Somewhere in the Skies crew? This is Patrick with Vetted, and I'm giving my review of The Age of Disclosure. Now, I made a couple of videos on my channel if you want to check those out for a really longer, more in-depth review. But basically, I would say this. There's some pros and cons, just like anything. Content and production, that's what I'm going to split it up to. So production-wise, I give it a 10 out of 10. Looks amazing. I mean, probably the most well-produced UFO documentary I've ever seen, to be honest with you. Excellent. Top-notch. Shout out to the crew. Content-wise, I mean, me personally, I would give it a 3 out of 10. This movie wasn't really made for me, though, right? I'm a UFO researcher. I'm in this all the time. I think for your average person, they're probably going to see it much higher than that, and I totally understand that. But for me personally, as someone who looks into this a lot, I just felt like there was a lot of contradictions of stuff that's been around in the UFO community a lot. That, again, I go into more in depth in my videos, just not enough time to explain all of that. If you want, I lay out the examples. I just felt like there was a lot of contradictions, and, maybe people aren't going to like this, what I'm saying, but hey, just being real, seeing Lou Elizondo at the front of this, not good. I think that guy's lost all credibility, and seeing him at the front of the film as it's a star of it, if you will, just really wasn't a fan of it. Felt like a lecture, right? He's standing in front of a chalkboard and telling us what's going on. I just felt like if you didn't believe this stuff, you were an idiot. And I'm not really a fan of that kind of messaging. It was just all in. Right? All in on this. It wasn't objective in any way. They never showed any sort of conflicting opinions or thoughts about this, right? It was just very one-sided and a little more objective, balanced approach for me personally would have been better. But, at the end of the day, something good that did come out of it, just to end optimistically here, is it got people talking. It started a conversation. People are discussing the topic in general, right? And I think that's always a good thing when people are interested in this topic and want to dive deeper into it. That to me was a plus in a lot of ways. It created conversation about the topic and will definitely bring more people in to be interested about it. So anyway, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Somewhere in the Skies fans. We'll see you on the next one. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.
Next up, we have another written review, this time from Sig0989 on Twitter, and they say, "Do not waste your time or money. This is literally a big nothing burger. There's no new information here. Same people saying the same thing. Wait until it's free to watch and you'll thank me for it. If you make a movie called The Age of Disclosure, you better bring the receipts, especially charging $20 to rent." Next, we have some more audio from our incredible moderator and occasional co-host on our live streams and interviews, the one, the only, Suzanne Landers. Let's hear from Suzanne.
Hi, everyone. This is Suzanne, your moderator. I'm sharing my thoughts on the new documentary, The Age of Disclosure. I know that there are many opinions about the impact and content of this recently released documentary, but my thoughts firmly begin with the old saying, "High tides raise all ships." I say this because until the phenomena touches more lives in some way, we're going to be stuck in the current government rut of secrecy. So will this documentary touch enough of the lives out there for people who haven't had any interest in the topic or a direct experience with it? I think that it will, and here's why I think that. As Michelle, one of our followers, wrote on our Facebook page, the documentary is literally a river of testimony, and I couldn't agree more with Michelle. To those of us who constantly study this field or have experienced the phenomena, this may not seem like an important thing, but in the reality of the political arena, people's focus equals power. Because if enough of the public focuses on this topic, things can actually change. But this documentary is not only a river of testimony, it's a river of testimony from a powerful, respected government and military section of people, the likes of which we have literally never seen take the stage together, addressing this subject with the public so openly. Think of it this way. In under 2 hours, the documentary literally brought the public up to speed on the subject, including the important and likely unconstitutional struggle between Congress and its oversight responsibilities and the numerous dark UAP operations in the hands of contractors and USAPs, unidentified special access programs. But what I think is also important is that the documentary took this subject, which can be so esoteric, and connected it to each human in a way I found quite powerful. And I hope that this resonates deeply with the uninitiated public. Examples of this include the fact that zero-point energy would be an incredibly positive thing for humanity, and just as importantly, for our planet. It would make every human's life better and easier. Instantaneous travel would do the exact same for humans and for the planet. And yet these huge life and planet improvements are black-boxed, classified, and withheld from us by our own government. And this should cause pause and concern in the average man. Additionally, I think it's very important that we keep this documentary in a perspective that includes other important facts, like the fairly recent attitude change around the topic in mainstream media. Think of all the recent interest in 3i Atlas and the coverage it got across all bandwidths. Think also of the mainstream media coverage, such as that of News Nation, which has given the topic and its participants honest, open airtime and intellectual consideration and coverage without ridicule. Think also of how News Nation's handling of this subject prompted all the other major news outlets to change their coverage from giggling and snark to substantive and curious, including coverage that followed the airing of the documentary yesterday. Then couple these concepts with the coverage that's happening right now, including Fox's Brett Baer interview with David Grush, released right after the release of the documentary. I suspect we're going to see much more of this in the days and weeks ahead. So my hope is that the documentary will spread the conversation to a wider, less informed audience, and that wider, less informed audience then finds themselves willing to join us in our fight for the truth and transparency on what is most likely the most important discovery in humanity's history. Thanks for listening.
Let's follow Suzanne up with someone she referenced in her review, and that's one of the most loyal listeners and supporters we have at Somewhere in the Skies, Michelle. Michelle has been with us for the long haul, and I cannot thank her enough. Here's Michelle from Roswell, Georgia, that is.
Hi, this is Michelle from Roswell, the one in Georgia. I was really impressed just by the comprehensive interviews, testimonials in the Age of Disclosure. And I really loved the interviews that Dan secured before the release. My favorite was the one that Bill Maher had on his show. I think it's really important to have all of these highly esteemed folks from media, government, military, science sectors together, reiterating the importance of the subject. The very real concern from Secretary of State Marco Rubio about not being ready for devastating events like Pearl Harbor and 9/11 hit home. Things are always clearer in the rear view, and very often there are folks out there sounding the alarm who are later credited with predicting outcomes, good or bad. This was certainly true with 9/11. I think that's something that should really alert the American public. However, attention spans are so short, and people are already overloaded with daily political drama, especially in the United States. I think if you're not already interested in the subject, you might just tune out or read a headline about the documentary. But regardless, I do think it was important to bring it all together in a serious format, getting serious attention, as opposed to the sometimes laughable tabloid-style cable UFO shows that people have been exposed to for years. So all in all, I consider it a win, a great piece for the record.
Hey guys, Ryan Sprague here from Somewhere in the Skies. The podcast has always been and always will be completely free for you to listen to. But creating it every week takes a lot of time, research, and resources. And to be honest, it's just never been free for me to create. That's why we built a few simple ways for you to help support the show and keep it going strong. You can join us over on Patreon or through Apple Premium. Both offer the same awesome perks. Ad-free episodes, early access to new content, exclusive bonus shows, and even priority to ask our guests your listener questions. It's a quick and easy way to support what we do for just a few bucks a month. And right now, you can even try Patreon for free for a week to see if it's right for you. To learn more and to join, head over to patreon.com/somewhereskies. That's patreon.com/somewhereskies. Or hit that subscribe button right at the top of your Apple Podcast feed. Thank you so much for listening, for supporting, and as always, keep looking up. I've got one more written review for you guys here through email, and that comes from River G. River G says, "My brothers and I watched this last night, and it's a great documentary. The price on Amazon reflects its quality, and it even played in some theaters. 34 high-level officials, military personnel, and scientists speak about the cover-up. It's effectively explained how we got here and makes a strong case for why the public must demand transparency. You'll also see some new faces offering fresh information and accounts. It provides compelling insider testimony, including Jay Stratton, who led the UAP task force, describing encounters with non-human intelligence craft and bodies. Dr. Hal Puthoff and Dr. Eric Davis also discussed their work within special access programs and explain how these craft might use warp-level technology that surpasses known physics. The only drawback is the lack of new videos and photographs. If you go in expecting that, you will be disappointed. But that isn't the goal. The goal is to be credible and to show first-hand testimony from people in positions of power who know the truth. One of my brothers isn't into this topic, so I explained how the secrecy works. I compared it to the Epstein situation. No single smoking gun given to the public, while the government holds the real evidence. Yet the number of credible witnesses, documents, and leaked material surrounding UAPs far outweighs what we have in the Epstein case. The reason it doesn't hit people as hard is because, unlike Epstein, which is a clear moral outrage, this subject is paradigm shifting. It challenges the beliefs of both political parties, all religions, and anyone grounded in our current understanding of reality. All right, thank you for that review. And our last audio submission comes from my very good friend and colleague from the Cosmic Frequencies event in Hexham, UK, the one, the only Nicole Skelties. And just to let you guys know, we will be putting on the event in 2026 as well. You can stay up to date on that at cosmicfrequencies.org. Again, that's cosmicfrequencies.org. And now, here's Nicole.
Last Friday, 21st of November, I invited a bunch of my musician friends over to my little inner Melbourne apartment for a watch party for the much-hyped Age of Disclosure doco, which dropped in Australia from 10 p.m. I had a drinking game prepared for what I knew from the trailer was bound to be an American-style blockbuster UFO expose using shock and awe tactics to expose the truth. Every time somebody said the phrase, Americans... ... demand, are ready for, deserve, etc., the truth, you had to down a shot. As one of my pals goes way back to the 90s when she was a member of my first band, Area 51, if Area 51 got mentioned, 2 shots. As we'd already downed plenty of espresso martinis by the time the film got started, I ended up just marking down every time these phrases came up, rather than insisting we neck vodka shots. A wise decision, because, spoiler alert, although Area 51 only got 1 mention, the tally for Americans, ... the truth, by the end of the film was 11, and it would have gotten very, very messy if we downed all those shots. For someone like me, there were no surprises in the Age of Disclosure. But someone like me is someone who has been down the UFO rabbit hole for 2 years, who has read widely about the phenomenon and related topics, follows numerous thoughtful podcasters from diverse perspectives, attended the Seoul Conference in 2024 and actually met and chatted to some of the peeps who turn up in the Age of Disclosure, someone who has followed the American disclosure narrative right from ploughing through Richard Dolan's painstakingly researched, politically informed 20th century histories of the cover-up, someone who has absorbed hundreds of hours of whistleblower testimonies both inside Congress and all over YouTube, and someone like me is also someone who gets up early hours Melbourne time in October this year to join Danny Sheehan's Zoom webinar for Global Disclosure Day. But the narrative and revelations in the Age of Disclosure were indeed shocking news to my UFO newbie companions. On numerous occasions, I had to stop the stream of overwhelmingly white, male, military and intelligence types to explain what crypto-terrestrials were and how they fit into folklore, the idea of aliens as time-travelling future humans, or even past humans of a lost civilization. The Age of Disclosure presents a compelling, shocking narrative, provided you don't know what the wonderful Jeffrey Kripal, Professor of Philosophy and Religious History at Rice University, describes as what's left off the table. You can prove anything, provided you just leave all the facts that don't fit your argument off the table. What are the links between the phenomenon and human consciousness, with creativity, with the metaphysical idea of co-created reality, the cosmos operating on as much a symbolic as a material level, about all those messages experiences have been getting for decades about the need for humanity to stop violence and environmental destruction and cultivate nurturing, caring, loving feelings towards Earth, each other, and all life here on this precious pale blue dot. Not to mention all the high strangeness associated with the phenomenon, which people struggle to make sense of at all. All that was left off the table. So what? Can't cover everything in one doco, right? But there are questions about how the Age of Disclosure will land with the vast majority of viewers who don't think UFOs are real, which is where I started 2 years ago. Elizondo's UFOs NHI are a potential threat narrative runs all the way through. Not surprising, given he is executive producer, and everyone in the doco has a military or intelligence background. And as I noted, just about everything I've read has been left off the table, except Elizondo's book and a bit of cover-up history like Roswell. The film's conclusion seems to be that given this imminent threat and the dire state of the world, humanity has the right to know the truth about recovered alien craft, as this technology could hold the key to free, clean energy here on Earth and help humanity pursue our destiny in space and colonise other planets, I guess, after we've completely trashed this one. But hang on, humans have had the technology to provide free, clean energy for decades. Surely it's not an NHI technology that is missing. It's human cooperation and caring that's missing. And since when does making people afraid of aliens through a threat narrative make everyone feel a renewed sense of positivity and wonder? Start filling up on those compassionate good vibes that are in dire short supply right now. Also, cranky alert here. 4% of the world's population live in the United States. Australians, like Europeans, including the Brits, don't respond well to human destiny being equated with American destiny. But my friends and I all noticed how often speakers interchange the future of humanity with the future of America, as if these were the same things. A recent poll in Australia in relation to the $368 billion we will have to somehow find to pay the US for nuclear submarines under the AUKUS agreement shows that the majority of Australians regard the United States as a threat to global democracy, the main threat to world peace. At least one positive impact that the age of disclosure might already be starting to make is a wake-up call to lefty intellectuals who for far too long have refused to take UFOs or anything paranormal seriously. On Saturday, The Guardian published an interview with filmmaker Dan Farah and a review of the film in which both are presented as credible, as opposed to the product of conspiracy-deluded whack jobs, The Guardian's usual framing of this kind of stuff. Perhaps, hopefully, this is a sign that the phenomenon won't long be left to the fear-mongering Murdoch press and social media tech bros to serve up as sensational clickbait in service of corporate profits. Meanwhile, let's not forget what the world needs more than anything right now.
Okay, so here is my personal review. I wrote this over on Letterboxd. So if you aren't familiar with Letterboxd, it's a social media site where you can review movies, compile movies you want to watch, and find other movie reviews. It's an awesome site, and I hope you'll follow me over on Letterboxd. That's LetterBoxd.com. Just search for Ryan Sprague. So, Dan Farah's The Age of Disclosure comes out swinging with big ambitions, and it is impressively high in profile when it comes to its cast of interviewees. With over 30 former government military and intelligence officials sitting down to talk UAPs, the film clearly wants to bring the conversation into the mainstream with authority. On a technical level, it's polished, serious, and confidently paced. If you're already invested in the disclosure narrative, the documentary feels like a rallying point of a modern, glossy push of the UFO topic as something deserving urgent public attention. But that can also make the film feel like something the UFO community itself has seen and heard time and time again. But, as many involved with the film itself have stated, it's not for the UFO community. It's for the public overall, for Congress, and even for the White House. But once you're past the gloss and sheen, the film, it starts to sag. The Age of Disclosure quickly becomes surprisingly dull, mostly because it never delivers anything truly new or concrete. It's almost entirely testimony-driven, with no meaningful documentation, no compelling visuals, and no skeptical counterpoint to sharpen the discussion. Instead of exploring the phenomenon's complexity or wonder, it leans heavily into a looming threat narrative. The idea that hidden technologies and non-human intelligence could upend world stability. It does this without offering much depth or historical framing. For a subject this fascinating, the end result it just falls oddly flat. That contrast becomes even more obvious when you put it next to something like James Fox's The Phenomenon. Fox's film is rich, energetic, and rooted in the full historical arc of the UFO mystery, weaving archival footage, global cases, and decades of testimony into something genuinely immersive. It feels like you're exploring a vast landscape, but The Age of Disclosure, by comparison, feels more like you're being handed a briefing memo, or in a classroom of some sort. The Age of Disclosure is narrow, repetitive, and focused mostly on modern fear rather than the wider meaning, history, and potential benefits of the UFO phenomenon. In the end, Farah's documentary wants to sound urgent, and sometimes it rightfully does so, but without the depth or documentation to really back it up, it's more likely to leave many bored rather than enlightened. Despite its shortcomings, The Age of Disclosure is still a very important piece of the larger UFO conversation. It gathers voices we rarely hear from, and some we hear a lot from, but it pushes the topic further into the public mainstream, something we always strive for. So for anyone interested in where the modern UFO disclosure movement is heading, it is absolutely worth watching. And that is my review of the movie, guys, but I do want to leave you with some parting words. I cannot stress enough, form your own opinions. If you're strapped for cash, wait for the price to go down on the documentary, or reach out to me personally, and I'll see what I can do to help you out. If we are truly living in the age of disclosure, I think it's important that Dan Farah, every single person in this film, and any military, intelligence, or government folks out there, just remember that you aren't the only voice of ufology. You never will be the only voice for ufology. Neither will celebrities, scientists, academics, theologians, podcasters, YouTubers, or anyone. We all have a voice in this highly enigmatic and ambiguous, mysterious, and deeply personal phenomenon. Disclosure doesn't come from anyone in this movie. It comes from your own experiences. It comes from you sharing your stories. It comes from the scientists who take your story and try to study and analyze it. It takes every single one of us to disclose our own truths, to perhaps someday get to the truth, if there's even a truth to begin with. Because if there's one thing we know about UFOs, it's that we know absolutely nothing. And maybe that's by some grand universal design. Or maybe it's by, as this documentary poses, by some super secret governmental design. But I urge you, if your eyes are not on this documentary, even for a few moments, go outside and put your eyes upward. That's where the possibilities truly lay, somewhere in the skies. Thank you so much for listening, and a huge thank you to all of you that sent in your ratings and reviews. Be sure to check out The Age of Disclosure on Amazon Prime to rent or to buy right now. I have one huge favor to ask of you guys, and I know it's a big ask. We all have our respective homes for podcast listening, and I get that moving to a different platform, it seems like a lot, but I'm here to humbly ask all of you to head on over to Spotify and follow the show. But not only that, please check out the video versions of each and every one of our episodes, past, present, and future. I'm going to be straight with y'all. We have on the back end recently partnered with Spotify as they move into the video podcasting world more and more. And I get it. People do not have time to watch full videos. Trust me, I am one of those people as well. But if you would consider hitting the video version of each podcast episode and just listening to it, you can glance over every now and again, check out my ugly mug or the beautiful mugs of our guests. And it's just like listening to the show anywhere else. This would help us out tremendously in many different ways, and I truly appreciate your consideration of moving over to Spotify to get your Somewhere in the Skies. We'll also have some exclusive bonus clips and content over on Spotify as well. So head over to Spotify, follow the show, and watch or listen over there. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, guys, I will see you next week. And remember, keep your feet on the ground, but never stop searching. Somewhere in the skies.
Somewhere in the Skies is part of the Somewhere podcast universe. Please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. To learn more about all of our shows, visit thespu.com.